Listen closely. This is not random. This is not a coincidence. If you are here, it means the silence finally broke. Today, on the 13th of January, something shifted in the unseen. A line was crossed. A permission was released. Archangel Michael says he saw your future. And for the first time in a very long time, he could not hold back the tears. Not tears of loss. Not tears of fear. Tears of weight. Tears of knowing what you have survived without ever being told why. There were moments when you thought heaven forgot your address. Moments when doors closed so quietly that no one noticed but you. Moments when you kept walking while your heart begged you to stop. Michael says every one of those moments was counted. None were wasted. None were ignored. There was a reason he was not allowed to speak. A reason this message was sealed. A reason you were kept in the dark longer than felt fair. Because if you had known too early, it would have broken you. And if you had known too late, you would have walked away. So it was held. Not denied. Held. Michael says there is a future version of you standing in a place you once cried about. A version of you who finally understands why the delays happened. Why the silence lasted. Why the answers did not come when you begged for them. And when he saw that version of you, he cried. Not because of pain. Because of contrast. He saw how close you came to quitting right before everything changed. He saw how many times you chose to stay when leaving would have been easier. He saw how quietly you carried things you never spoke about. There were nights when you thought no one noticed your strength because you never announced it. Michael says heaven noticed every single time. That is why this message has a limit. That is why there are seconds involved. Not because time is running out, but because timing has arrived. 16 seconds is not a threat. It is a doorway. A window where alignment locks in. A moment where what was held back is allowed to move forward. Michael says something was paused on purpose until you were ready to receive it without fear. Not money. Not attention. Not applause. Peace with your own path. Because once that settles, everything else follows naturally. You were never late. You were never behind. You were being protected from becoming someone you would not recognize. There is a decision forming around you now. Not forced. Not loud. But final. Michael says once this decision completes itself, the confusion lifts. The noise quiets. The pressure eases. And you will realize that the future he saw was never about struggle. It was about release. Release from proving. Release from explaining. Release from carrying what was never yours to begin with. That is why he cried. Because you made it to the point most people turn back. Stay here. Do not rush this moment. Do not dismiss the stillness you feel right now. The next part reveals what was locked behind those 16 seconds and why it changes the way the next chapter begins. Michael says the reason this message reached you today is because something finally stepped out of your way. For a long time, there was an unseen resistance around you. Not punishment. Not delay. Protection. There were outcomes you were not meant to touch yet. People you were not meant to meet too early. Answers that would have confused you instead of helping you. So heaven stayed quiet. Michael says you kept asking for clarity, but what you actually needed was strength. And strength does not grow in comfort. It grows in waiting rooms, in unanswered questions, in moments where faith is the only thing keeping you upright. That is why your path looked different from others. Why you felt out of sync with the world around you. Why you sometimes wondered if you missed your moment. You did not miss anything. You were being shaped. There is something specific Michael saw in your future. A turning point where everything that once drained you no longer has access to you. Where your energy is no longer scattered trying to please, fix, or explain. He saw you choosing yourself without guilt. And that choice changes the direction of everything. What shocked him most was not what you gain. It was what you refuse to carry anymore. Old expectations fall away. Old labels lose their grip. Old wounds stop dictating your decisions. Michael says this is where your voice changes. Not louder, clearer. And when clarity arrives, the right people recognize you without effort. The right opportunities find you without chasing. The right peace settles in without resistance. If this message is reaching you deeply, let it be known. A simple interaction anchors this moment more than you realize. Your presence here is not passive. Those who stay connected to messages like this often notice the shift sooner. Consistency opens doors that curiosity alone cannot. Michael says the next part explains why one specific situation in your life suddenly begins to resolve itself and why what felt impossible starts moving quietly in your favor. Stay with this. You are closer than you think. Michael says there is one situation you stopped talking about because explaining it became exhausting. Not because it did not matter, but because you were tired of reliving it every time someone asked. He saw how you learned to smile through it, how you changed the subject, how you told yourself you were fine even when something inside you stayed unsettled. That situation did not disappear. It was paused. There was an unseen hand keeping it from collapsing or resolving too early, because either outcome would have taken you off the path you are meant to walk now. Michael says the moment you stopped forcing answers, the path began to clear. Not instantly, quietly. Things started rearranging behind the scenes. Conversations you never heard took place. Decisions you did not influence were made in your favor. That is why recently you may have felt an unusual calm mixed with uncertainty, like standing at the edge of something without knowing whether to step forward or wait. That feeling is alignment forming. Michael saw that once this situation resolves, you stop questioning your worth. You stop replaying the past. You stop wondering if you should have done more or been different. Because the outcome makes it clear. You did enough. You were enough. This is also why certain connections have felt distant lately. Not broken, just fading. Michael says they were part of a season that has ended. Holding on to them now would slow what is coming next. What surprised him most was how gently this transition happens. No chaos. No dramatic ending. Just a moment where you realize you no longer feel the same way about what once controlled your emotions. And when that control fades, your energy returns to you. The next part reveals why this shift affects your future more than any external change and how it unlocks a level of peace you have not experienced before. Stay present. This message is unfolding exactly when it should. Michael says there is a moment ahead where you realize you are no longer chasing peace. You are living inside it. This is the part of your future that was hidden the longest. Not because it was fragile, but because it was powerful enough to change how you see yourself. Forever. He saw you waking up one day without the familiar heaviness. No tightness in your chest. No replaying old conversations. No silent questions asking why things happened the way they did. And that calm scares you at first. Because it feels unfamiliar. Because chaos had become normal. Michael says this is where many people self-sabotage. They mistake peace for emptiness. They try to re-enter old cycles just to feel something familiar. But you don't. You pause. You breathe. You let the quiet stay. That choice alters your timeline. He saw how people start responding to you differently. Not because you demand respect. Because you no longer seek permission. Your presence becomes steady. Your words carry weight. Your silence speaks louder than explanations ever did. Michael says when this message resonates deeply, acknowledging it strengthens the alignment. A simple act of connection locks this moment into memory. Those who engage with what speaks to them tend to notice the results sooner. This is also when your intuition sharpens. You sense what is right without debating it. You walk away from what drains you without guilt. The future Michael saw does not arrive with fireworks. It arrives with certainty. Certainty that you are exactly where you should be. Certainty that nothing real was lost. Certainty that what is meant for you no longer needs to be chased. The next part reveals why one final emotional barrier dissolves and how it clears the path for what has been waiting patiently for you. Do not disconnect now. This is where everything quietly comes together. Michael says there is one last barrier that dissolves quietly, without drama, without warning. It is not fear. It is not doubt. It is the habit of bracing yourself. For a long time, you lived as if something could be taken at any moment. So even during good days, a part of you stayed guarded, prepared, tense. Michael says this habit kept you alive before, but it is no longer needed now. He saw the moment you stop waiting for things to go wrong. Not because life becomes perfect, but because you finally trust yourself to handle whatever comes. That trust changes how the world meets you. Opportunities no longer test you first. They recognize you. People no longer question your value. They feel it. You stop explaining your journey to those who were never meant to understand it. You stop shrinking your story to make others comfortable. Michael says this is when momentum returns. Not rushed, not forced, natural. Things begin to move at a pace that feels right to your nervous system. No urgency, no pressure. And when challenges appear, they do not shake you. They confirm how far you have come. This is the future Michael saw. Not a life without storms, but a self that no longer fears the weather. Stay connected. The next part reveals how this internal shift opens a door you did not even know existed and why stepping through it feels effortless for the first time. Michael says the door that opens next is not loud. It does not announce itself. It does not demand attention. It opens because you are finally aligned enough to notice it. This door was invisible to you before, not because it was hidden, but because you were always looking for something dramatic. Something obvious. Something that would prove everything you went through had meaning. But meaning does not arrive screaming. It arrives steady. Michael saw you step into a space where things feel strangely familiar, even though you have never been there before. A place where your effort matches your outcome, where your energy is returned instead of drained. And at first, you hesitate, not because you are afraid of failing, but because you are afraid of how easy it feels. Ease feels suspicious when struggle has been your language for so long. Michael says this is where your identity updates. You stop seeing yourself as someone who survives. You begin seeing yourself as someone who chooses. You choose what you give your time to. You choose who gets access to you. You choose rest without guilt. And the world responds immediately. Not with noise. With alignment. Things that once required constant effort now flow naturally. Conversations move forward without resistance. Plans solidify without force. Michael saw that this is when your past finally stops chasing you. Not because it disappears, but because it no longer recognizes you as the same person. You outgrew the version of yourself that needed validation. You outgrew the version that waited for permission. This door does not lead to chaos. It leads to clarity. And clarity feels calm. So calm that many people mistake it for boredom. But you will recognize it. Because your body relaxes. Your breath deepens. Your mind quiets. Stay with this message. The next part reveals why one unexpected confirmation appears in your life and how it seals this transition completely. Michael says the confirmation arrives in a way you do not expect. Not as a grand sign. Not as a dramatic announcement. It arrives quietly, through something ordinary. A message you were not waiting for. A conversation that shifts direction unexpectedly. A small moment that lands heavier than it should. And when it happens, something inside you recognizes it instantly. Michael saw you pause. Not out of confusion. Out of knowing. Because this confirmation does not bring excitement first. It brings relief. Relief that you were not imagining the shift. Relief that your patience was not wasted. Relief that the quiet work you did internally mattered more than anything visible. This is when doubt loosens its grip. You stop asking if you are on the right path. You start asking how you want to walk it. Michael says this is also when you notice how much you have changed. Not in how you speak, but in what you no longer react to. Things that once triggered you now pass by without a response. Words that once hurt no longer land the same way. That is growth you cannot fake. The confirmation does something else too. It closes a chapter without needing closure. You do not need explanations. You do not need apologies. You do not need anyone to finally understand. You understand. Michael saw that once this happens, your energy becomes clean. No leaks. No emotional debts. And when your energy is clean, the right things find you faster. Stay present. The next part reveals why something you once believed was lost returns in a completely new form. Michael says what returns to you is not what you lost. It is better. For a long time, you believed something meaningful slipped through your hands. A chance. A connection. A version of life you thought you missed. Michael says that belief shaped many of your choices. It made you careful. It made you hesitant. It made you afraid to want too much. But what he saw in your future corrected that story completely. Nothing meant for you was taken away. It was refined. What returns carries wisdom with it. Balance. Right timing. It does not ask you to prove yourself. It meets you where you are now, not where you were before. And when it arrives, you realize why the earlier version could not stay. You were still becoming. Michael says this return does not feel like excitement at first. It feels like recognition. Like meeting something that already knows you. That does not rush you. That does not pressure you. It fits. This is also where gratitude deepens. Not loud gratitude. Quiet appreciation. You start noticing how carefully your life has been arranged. Even the parts that once hurt. Michael saw you smile at something simple and realize how far you have come. Not in achievements, but in inner steadiness. This return confirms that your waiting had intelligence. Your patience had purpose. Stay here. The next part reveals why your future now begins moving faster and how to stay grounded as momentum builds. Michael says when momentum begins, it does not rush you. It matches you. This is important, because in the past, speed overwhelmed you. Things moved too fast or too slow, never in rhythm with who you were becoming. But now, the pace feels right. You notice progress without pressure. Forward movement without anxiety. Michael saw you trust the process without checking the clock. Without comparing your timing to anyone else's. And that trust becomes magnetic. People sense it. Opportunities respond to it. Situations align around it. This is when you stop asking, when will it happen? And start asking, how do I want to experience this? That shift changes everything. Michael says you begin to enjoy the journey instead of bracing for the outcome. You allow good things to arrive without questioning how long they will last. That is new for you. There was a time when happiness made you nervous, when calm felt temporary. But now, you stay present. And presence strengthens momentum. You also become more selective, not guarded, intentional. You choose quality over noise, depth over distraction. Michael saw that this discernment protects what you are building. It keeps your energy clean. It keeps your direction clear. Stay with this unfolding. The next part reveals how one internal realization anchors everything and makes this progress sustainable. Michael says the realization that anchors everything is simple, but it changes how you live. You stop measuring your life by outcomes. You start measuring it by alignment. For a long time, you believed peace would arrive after certain things happened. After answers. After success. After recognition. But what Michael saw is different. Peace arrives when you stop negotiating with yourself. When you no longer say yes to things that drain you just to avoid discomfort. When you no longer betray your own boundaries to keep the peace with others. This realization settles deep. You begin to move slower, but with certainty. You speak less, but with intention. You listen to your inner signals without questioning them. Michael says this is where stability forms. Not the kind that depends on circumstances. The kind that comes from self-trust. And once self-trust is established, nothing external can shake you easily. You stop chasing validation because you recognize your own growth. You stop explaining your choices because you finally understand them. This is also when your future stops feeling fragile. It feels grounded. Michael saw you standing in a place where you no longer fear losing what you have built. Because you know you can rebuild from truth, not desperation. Stay present. The next part reveals how this grounded state attracts something meaningful and why it arrives without struggle. Michael says what arrives next is drawn to who you have become, not to what you want. This is important. In the past, you attracted things through effort, through overthinking, through trying to be ready before you felt ready. But now, attraction happens differently. It happens through resonance. What is meant for you recognizes your calm. It responds to your clarity. It aligns with your pace. Michael saw you receive something that does not ask you to prove your worth. It does not test your patience. It does not trigger old patterns. It feels steady from the beginning. And because of that, you trust it. There is no internal debate. No second guessing. No urge to rush or delay. This is new territory. Michael says this arrival reinforces everything you have learned. It confirms that growth does not require struggle. That fulfillment does not demand exhaustion. You start to understand that ease is not laziness. It is alignment. And once you accept that, you stop resisting good things. You allow support. You allow rest. You allow yourself to receive without guilt. Michael saw this moment and smiled, because it marked the end of a long season of proving. Stay with this message. The next part reveals how your perspective on the past finally transforms and how it frees even more of your energy. Michael says the way you see your past changes completely, not in memory, but in meaning. Moments that once felt like mistakes begin to look like preparation. Delays start to resemble guidance. Losses reveal themselves as redirections. This does not erase what you felt. It honors it. Michael saw you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What did this build in me?" That question shifts your identity. You no longer define yourself by what you endured. You define yourself by what you integrated. This is where forgiveness becomes natural, not forced, not rushed. You release resentment not to excuse others, but to return your energy to yourself. Michael says this release is subtle, but powerful. It lightens your emotional body. It sharpens your intuition. You start to remember your past without being pulled back into it. You can look at old chapters without reopening wounds. That is freedom. Michael saw that this shift creates space. Space for creativity. Space for curiosity. Space for joy without explanation. And when space opens, new possibilities breathe. Stay present. The next part reveals how this inner freedom expresses itself outwardly and changes the way others respond to you. Michael says when inner freedom settles, it shows on you. Not in appearance, but in presence. People begin to respond to you differently without knowing why. Conversations flow easier. Respect comes naturally. You are no longer trying to be understood. You are simply being. This is where influence replaces effort. Michael saw that you stop explaining your choices. You trust that those meant to walk with you will recognize your direction. And they do. Others quietly fall away. Not out of conflict, out of alignment. This does not hurt the way it once would have, because you no longer take it personally. Michael says this is also when your voice carries weight, not because it is louder, but because it is grounded. When you speak, it comes from clarity instead of urgency, from truth instead of fear. This presence protects you. It keeps you from being pulled into unnecessary drama. It keeps you focused on what actually matters. Michael saw that this outward shift is a reflection of inner peace, not performance. And because of that, it lasts. Stay connected. The next part reveals how this stable presence sets the stage for a long-term chapter of fulfillment. Michael says this is where fulfillment stops feeling like a destination and starts feeling like a way of living. You no longer wait for permission to enjoy your life. You no longer postpone peace until everything is perfect. Fulfillment becomes woven into ordinary moments, simple mornings, unrushed conversations, decisions made without inner conflict. Michael saw you building a life that supports you instead of draining you, a rhythm that respects your energy, a pace that feels sustainable. This is the chapter that lasts, not because nothing changes, but because you are no longer afraid of change. You trust yourself to adapt without losing yourself. Michael says this trust creates stability that cannot be shaken by external circumstances. Your sense of self no longer depends on outcomes, and because of that, you experience gratitude more often, not as an obligation, as a natural response. You notice how far you have come without needing to announce it. You honor your growth quietly. Michael saw that this quiet confidence is what anchors your future. It keeps you grounded as new opportunities unfold. Stay with this. The next part reveals why this fulfillment opens space for something meaningful to be built over time. Michael says what you begin to build now is not rushed. It is intentional. In the past, you felt pressure to move quickly, to keep up, to prove momentum. But this time, creation comes from clarity, not urgency. You choose what deserves your attention. You invest energy where it can grow. Michael saw you committing to something that feels aligned with your values. Not because it looks impressive, but because it feels true. This commitment brings satisfaction before results even appear. You enjoy the process. You stay present with the work. And because of that, what you build has depth. Michael says this is where long-term fulfillment takes root. Not through constant achievement, but through meaningful engagement. You stop chasing success. You start embodying it. This shift changes how you define progress. It becomes personal. It becomes sustainable. Michael saw that what you create now supports your future self, not just your current desires. Stay present. The next part reveals how this foundation allows you to handle growth without losing balance. Michael says growth begins to respond to you instead of chasing you. This is a quiet kind of expansion, not overwhelming, not chaotic. It stretches you without breaking your rhythm. In the past, growth came with pressure, more responsibility, more expectations. But now, it arrives with support. You notice that as things expand, you remain steady. Your routines hold. Your values stay intact. Michael saw you saying no without fear and yes without hesitation. That balance keeps you grounded. This is where you realize that growth does not have to cost your peace. You adapt without losing yourself. You adjust without panic. Michael says this stability allows you to lead your life instead of reacting to it. And because you are not rushing, you see more clearly. You make better choices. You protect what matters. Stay with this unfolding. The next part reveals how this balanced growth reshapes your vision for the future. Michael says your vision for the future becomes calmer, but clearer. You no longer imagine extremes. You imagine sustainability. Instead of chasing dramatic change, you focus on what can last. This is a powerful shift. Your goals become grounded in who you are, not who you are trying to impress. Your dreams feel achievable without feeling small. Michael saw you release unrealistic timelines. You stop forcing outcomes to prove your progress. And because of that, your vision gains depth. You think in seasons instead of deadlines. You plan with patience instead of urgency. This does not slow you down. It strengthens you. Michael says this kind of vision attracts the right kind of support. Support that respects your pace. Support that aligns with your values. You begin to see your future as something you walk into, not something you chase. Stay present. The next part reveals how this grounded vision transforms your relationship with uncertainty. Michael says uncertainty no longer feels like a threat. It becomes a companion. You stop needing everything mapped out to move forward. You trust yourself to respond in real time. In the past, uncertainty triggered anxiety. It made you hesitate. It made you second guess. But now, it feels spacious. Michael saw you standing at the edge of the unknown without tension, curious instead of afraid. This is because you are no longer attaching your worth to outcomes. You know who you are regardless of how things unfold. That confidence softens uncertainty. You allow room for discovery. You allow room for change. Michael says this flexibility keeps you adaptable without losing direction. You move forward with openness, not control. And in that openness, new paths reveal themselves naturally. Stay with this awareness. The next part reveals how this new relationship with uncertainty invites unexpected opportunities. Michael says the opportunities that appear now do not arrive with pressure. They arrive as invitations. You are no longer pushed into choices. You are asked. And because you are grounded, you can feel which invitations are right. In the past, opportunity felt like something you had to grab quickly before it disappeared. That urgency often led to exhaustion. But now, opportunity respects your timing. Michael saw you consider options without fear of missing out. You trust that what is meant for you will remain available. This changes how you decide. You choose from alignment, not anxiety. From curiosity, not desperation. Michael says this approach opens doors that stay open. And because you are not rushing, you notice details you would have missed before. You make informed choices. You move with intention. Stay present. The next part reveals how these aligned choices shape a future that feels truly yours. Michael says this is where your life starts to feel unmistakably yours. Not borrowed. Not influenced. Not shaped by expectation. Yours. You wake up with a sense of direction that does not need validation. You move through your days without the constant pull to compare. Michael saw that this ownership changes everything. Your decisions become cleaner. Your priorities become clearer. Your energy stops leaking into places it does not belong. This is when confidence becomes quiet and steady. Not something you perform. Something you inhabit. You stop wondering if you are doing enough. You know when you are aligned. Michael says this inner certainty becomes your compass. It guides you through choices without forcing you. And because you trust it, life feels less complicated. You simplify without loss. You let go without regret. Michael saw that this simplicity brings freedom. Freedom to enjoy what you have built. Freedom to move forward without dragging the past behind you. Stay here. The next part reveals how this sense of ownership deepens into lasting peace and why it cannot be taken from you.